Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint Consulting, Darian the Family Guy, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best-kept secret in teaching. You got it, international education. Welcome to the show. All right, this is Greg coming at you with another episode from the International Teacher Podcast, and I'm alone today, I think, as far as hosts. I think Kent's still asleep, Darian is asleep, and Jacqueline, I think, is asleep in Mexico. She said it was a little bit too late for her. She apologizes, and so do the other guys. But you know what? I have Terence Tong here on our show, and he's coming into us from Kuwait currently. Welcome to the show, Terence.
Hey, thank you for having me, Greg. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Hey, you know, you're one of Jacqueline's friends. I think it's a small world. Am I correct about that?
I think Jacqueline, we share mutual friends, Jacqueline and I.
Share mutual.
I think one of your previous guests over the summer, Hannah and Jake Loney, are current colleagues of ours, and I think they appeared on the podcast earlier in the year, and through the Loneys, we made a connection. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I'm excited to hear why you're on the show and what we're going to talk about. Let's start a little bit with your background, a little bit of an elevator version of education for you and how you got into international. Can you do that for us?
No, absolutely. Well, this is my coming up to the end of my 24th year in education. I was born in Hong Kong, grew up in Canada. I spent the first 6 years of my career teaching in Toronto at a couple of different small private schools. And then I hit a milestone age, and I'm not going to tell you which milestone age that was. I'll be dating myself there. Yes, that's right. And then at that point in my life, I was like, you know what? I haven't really traveled, and I had no real attachments, to Canada at that point. I nothing to really keep me there. So okay, let's take a stab at this. And then in 2006 was when I came to Kuwait for the first time. As per all international teaching contractors, like, okay, let's give it a try for 2 years. Let's go from there. And then, 2 years turned into 3, into 4, into 5. And then at one point, the saying was, oh, one more year. And then, ended up being 8 years here in Kuwait, from 06 to 14. During that time period, I met my wife. She's a fellow Canadian from Montreal. We got married. And then in 2014, we moved to Seoul International School in South Korea, South Korea. Spent 8 years there. Had a daughter, Olivia, during COVID, and then in 2022 we took a sabbatical. We took a year off. Went home to Canada. We have a small place just north of Montreal in the Laurentians, cottage country. This gave Olivia a chance, the opportunity to be at home, see your grandparents, experience the Canadian, 4 seasons and and whatnot. And then 2 school years ago, 23, 24, we came back overseas, and being familiar with Kuwait and everything that this part of the region offers, Kuwait was an easy landing spot, for us to get back into international teaching. And we've been here for 2 years, and we'll be here for a couple more after this.
Oh, I got 1,000 questions for you. I was in Kuwait back in 2005 to 2007, so I definitely empathize with you. I know a little bit about how it is there, and we'll talk more about that. I'm most interested in that. Well, let's talk about a couple things. Like, how did you get into international teaching when you were in Canada?
Okay.
Did you go to a job fair? Did you go to Queen's or something?
No, I made that decision really late in the school year. It wasn't until May, I think it was May or early June. It was towards the end of the school year in Canada. I was like, you know what? I need to do something. I need to do something for myself before I, for lack of a better phrase, get stuck in this rut. I see my peers, friends from high school, friends from college, they hit a certain point in their life, and it was, get married, pick up the mortgage,
Teach in the same
you know,
district all the
teach in the
time,
same
right?
district, right? Like once you're tied into the school board, then hey, that's your golden ticket, right? That's and so I didn't necessarily want that for myself. It works for them, it works really well for them, and that's fantastic. But for me, I wanted something a little different, and so I just took a chance, and it wasn't a job fair, it wasn't on a recruiting site. I think it was just I serendipitously, kind of fell into a job wanted ad
Like trolling
through
through
like
the internet or something.
something of that nature, and then it was at that point a small startup school here in Kuwait, the American Baccalaureate School. They've since rebranded and whatnot. It was at first it was a 1 year contract, and so okay, well, you know what, the typical overseas international teaching package, right? The housing paid for, healthcare, return flight, et cetera, et cetera. And that school being new only gave out 1 year contracts. So I said, okay, well, let's give it a try. If I like
Did
it,
they
great.
interview
If
you
not,
on video, or did they call you, or did you just
uh,
email back and
back
forth?
back then it was the principal at that point was a lady from the Toronto area. So we just chatted on the phone, and then I think that, if I'm not mistaken, at one point we met up at a Tim Hortons just to kind of finalize the paperwork and just put name to face, so that when we arrived in country in August, we weren't totally strangers, right? Um, so no, it was serendipitous. Stumbled on the ad. Tossed in my application package, and then within, I would say, 10, 12 days, I was like, hey, I'm moving to Kuwait.
Well, it must have
So
helped because the person recruiting you is also Canadian, and you talked on the phone, so it must have been sort of not just serendipitous, but you must have gotten along with her, because if those interviews went really well just on phone, and then you threw everything in a bag and left in August, that's just a couple months after May.
no, and she had been in country for a couple of years at that point, and she was able to answer some of the questions, or many of the questions that I had. So it was like, okay, well, let's give it a go. And honestly, Greg, it was like, it's 10 months, really, right? When you're thinking, like, the course of a school year, tossing, winter holidays and spring break and all
Just
that.
try it out.
Like,
Yeah. It's
just
like,
try it
what's
out.
a
It's
year out of
it's
your life?
exactly right. It's 10 months. If I like it, great. I'll stay on for another year or two, whatever. But if not, no harm, no foul. I wasn't tied into to the federation or to the school boards. It wasn't like I was going to miss out time on my retirement funds or anything like that. So I was like, hey, let's just give it a try. Um, I didn't have enough reasons not to do it. Let me put it that
Got
way.
it. Right. So you weren't
Right?
running from anything. It's more like you're trying something out. And what did your family say? You're like, by the way, I'll go to Kuwait. Family and
So
friends.
the only thing I knew about Kuwait or the region at that point was from the first Gulf War. I saw the CNN footage, from 91, 92, right? Like, the tracers, the night footage, and
Right. Yeah, I
the
remember that.
tracers
Yeah.
illuminating the sky and whatnot. And so there's a bit of skepticism. There's obvious concern for my safety and whatnot. It certainly wasn't about the finances, because the money, not spectacular, was enough, was enough to justify the move. But certainly it was just the safety, and the accommodations, how you gonna get around, and things like that. But once I got here, once I was able to show, share photos and whatnot with and little short snippets of videos with family and friends at that point, it made the transition a little bit easier for them. It's like, oh yeah, instead of just being up the road, or
Yeah. I mean, there's normal
other
things
part of
you're
the city.
doing. You're having dinner with people, you're going out, you're going shopping. So this is real personal for me, because I only did my 2 year contract.
Okay.
I was escaping a different school basically, and went to Kuwait as a alternative to get me away from a school that wasn't really fit for me. And
Okay.
when I got there, I was like, okay, whatever. And there wasn't very much for me to do. What I did was I sort of hunkered down and did my daily life by just passing through life, teaching, overworking, and then I went and did like my master's. All right, I
Okay.
did it through Framingham, which is a online. They would come to the school 9 different times and do 9 different lessons, and we did that kind of stuff. So that's me. I went there and sort of survived and didn't enjoy it. What kept you there
That's
for
a great
eight
question.
years?
Um, the lesson I've learned is no matter the situation, you have to make it work for you. And from the sounds of it, certainly you made it work for you, in the time that you were here. What I did was I joined a beach club. So that gave me a instant community and a place to retreat to outside of school and school housing. I played ultimate frisbee. I played softball. There's a expat community around those activities, and so I was able to build a network of of friends and associates outside of just colleagues from my school. And then at one point, I mean, I'm not gonna, um, hide this, but like at one point, I'm saying, oh yeah, I'm done. I'm done with Kuwait. Like, it's been 2 years. Like, in 2008, I went to a job fair in Hong Kong. I went to a search associates fair in Hong Kong. Um, didn't land anything. Nothing that was worth me making the move again. So I hunkered down for another year. And then, so okay, well, you know what? And at that point, I had changed schools. I was at a different school, Albayan BBS, and I had some growing pains there, but I really enjoyed, the school leadership there, and my divisional principal and the VP and the people that I was working with there, and I experienced real growth as a professional. And at one point, in chatting with Debbie McIntosh, she was my middle school principal then. She's retired now, but she said, "Hey Terry, like, what do you really want out of this experience, right? Are you just gonna coast through your international teaching career, just being happy, being satisfied with being a classroom teacher, or are you wanting something more?" And so she really challenged me, and I out of my master's at that point. I was still really early in my career. I was 8 years in. I had my master's in leadership at that point, and Debbie was really instrumental in providing me with opportunities like middle leadership opportunities. Being a department head and chairing accreditation committees and whatnot. And she was really the one that, despite my flaws and some of my rough edges, she saw that, hey, you know what, like, let's really help Terry grow and nurture my desire to be in leadership, and she really put me onto that path. And I think being happy at a place of work and being rewarded and nurtured, and gave me more reasons to stay in Kuwait.
Right.
And then at that point, we're talking about like 2009, 2010, and I met Marie at a party, at a Halloween party. Just a
In
bunch of
comes
school,
the woman
right?
of your life. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's Halloween party. Just a bunch of teachers from and expats. Oil and gas people. Military contractors. Just expats having a house party and whatnot. Met Marie, and then obviously once that happened, the game changed, right? Everything changed. Then we all of a sudden, yes, I had someone else to share this experience with,
Well, I tell you
and
what, when I was in Kuwait, I really just coasted through, and I believe that as long as I like my job, I can live anywhere. And for me, that time, it wasn't even that. I was trying to escape that other school. So I coasted for 2 years, and neither of the two really hit me. I mean, I didn't have the same experience. I wasn't Al Bayan is a very established school, and the school I was at, Dasman at the time. And for me, it was just like, I need to do my job and get out of there. But you're very fortunate, and I like what you said about you make what your experience is. And for me, my experience, I just sort of coasted through and, found the next thing smoking, right, to get out of there. But you really made a life with a couple extra fortunate things. And number one, you had that what was a mentor. I wanted to say master. You
Yeah.
have a mentor
No.
that took you on and said, "Hey, what are you going to do? You're going to just enjoy this? You're going to just be mediocre like Greg LeMoyne was, or are you going to make something of yourself?" Right? And I love that because Kuwait, you have to. For listeners, I mean, Kuwait is Kuwait City. That's the whole country right there. That's the only city really. There's some smaller little outcropping places, but that's what you have to do is in Kuwait City. There's not a lot of exploration. You've got Iraq to the north. Saudi's opened up since then, right? You
Yes,
can get
absolutely.
visas into Saudi now. That was different. Back then you couldn't even go south. So there was nowhere to go unless you get onto a plane. So I really applaud you for just finding that kind of a lifestyle. I've often wanted to talk to people that stayed longer times in Kuwait and find out why. But then I find out you met your wife there too. That's a game changer.
Oh,
I'd probably
absolutely.
stay in Kuwait if I found a wife too.
We share same interests. We spend our weekends at the beach clubs. We travel around the region and internationally. And once again, like we did what we need to do to make it work for us, right? And of course, we left and came back, and I'm sure you have a whole whack of questions about that as well.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit. So you went to the Hong Kong Search Associates, and you went to Hong Kong for the job fair in that year. With both you together as a teaching couple, then, or no?
No, that was pre-Marie. That was in I think it was 08. I think it was like winter of 2008. It was one of the first years that that search had the Hong Kong fair. And yeah, I went. I had a couple of interviews. Made some connections. What you usually do at the job fairs, anyways. But nothing really, drove me.
Went back empty-handed,
really,
right?
Yeah, I came back empty-handed. I was, honestly, I was a little dejected. I was like, okay, maybe I thought I was able to translate the experience here in Kuwait into something different, right? Into another position. The Hong Kong fair worked for me because at that point in time, I was interested in going to Hong Kong. My younger brother's there. Him and his family are live and work there in Hong Kong. Being born in Hong Kong, it was an easy place, let's say, for me to go back to and maybe try to establish roots there. But it didn't work out. And so, came back a little empty-handed, dejected, and then, I was like, okay, let's stick it out for another year and see what happens. And then, I come back in the fall, and there's Marie. So and the game changed.
Let's talk about that first. Let's talk about the job fair for a second because we don't talk a lot we haven't really talked yet about this. I like you, similar to your situation. Like you, I went to a job fair a couple of years back, and I had retained my position, so I sort of cushioned it. Like I was transparent and said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the States. I'm going to go to a job fair. And I'm going to search for another job. And my current bosses had said, if you don't find anything, you still have a job when you get back. So I sort of cushioned it, planning ahead, being transparent. And then I went to the job fair and I didn't find anything. I walked away empty-handed as far as a job, but I did a lot of great networking. People I even still talk to now. Was that your same situation or similar?
It was. If I remember correctly, the Hong Kong fair at that time was in early December, and with Al Bayan, at that time I didn't need to turn in my notice of whether I was going to return,
your
my intention whether I was going to return until after the job fair. It was close. I think it was like December 15th before we went our separate ways for the winter holidays. I had to let the school know, but I definitely had time. It wasn't a situation where like I had to let the school know that, maybe I may or may not be coming back. I'm going to go to job fair first and then see what happens there. And then I'll let you know in a couple weeks, or feel free to start interviewing people for my job. And, if you find someone, if someone's, going to take my position, let me know so that I get, right up first refusal or all that kind of stuff. No, it wasn't. It's just the timing at that point just really aligned, Greg, in the
And your
sense that I
leaders
was
are
able
okay
to.
with that? Because
No,
I'm
absolutely,
worried. Some
absolutely.
people are worried about like if I can't tell my current leaders because I need their recommendations, right? You need to have at least three recommendations to get into those
Mhm,
job
mhm.
fairs in general. But tell me
No,
a little bit about that.
at that point, because the timeline like aligned really well, worked out really well. I was transparent. I had a really good relationship with Debbie and with the AP, and so yeah, I mean, I had fulfilled my contract. I was 2 years in, so it wasn't I wasn't breaking contract. I wasn't anything doing anything nefarious. So and they were supportive. So I was within the schools provided timelines. So I wasn't doing anything that wasn't afforded the opportunity to do. So yeah, I went to Hong Kong.
Good.
Didn't land anything that I wanted to, and I came back. I recommitted to Kuwait, and like hey, it happens, right? Like,
I tell you, it takes a strong person to feel that way, though. Even though if you cushion yourself, I don't know about you, but I felt like a failure, even though I had come back
mm,
to a position. I felt like I was going to that fair, and I didn't.
mhm,
I knew I wasn't a failure, but I still had that
mhm,
like I didn't win. I didn't
mhm,
get that golden ticket. The next step.
mhm,
I
mhm.
didn't succeed at that fair, and a
Okay.
lot of people feel that way. Although
Yeah.
I know better than that. I feel that maybe I failed, but I knew in my heart that it's not a failure. And that's my message
Uh-huh.
to listeners. It's not a failure,
Mhm.
but you can't help feel that way a little bit.
No, for sure. Like recruiting is emotionally taxing because you spend so much time and effort and energy researching schools, right? Tailoring your cover letter, and there's so much hope and excitement associated with each uh, application package that you send out, right?
Yes,
There's
your
a
heart's
piece
in
of
it.
yourself that you're right. There's a piece of yourself that goes out with it, and with every you know letter or email that comes back and say, oh, not a good fit, or your experiences doesn't align with what we're looking for. Yeah, it hurts, right? And I I didn't feel that at that time in my career, in
Mm.
2008, 2009. I was okay, it is what it is. But um, do circle back to this at some point, Greg. It wasn't until about during the COVID years that emotion of that, I don't want to use the word resentment, but like why not me really came back
Right.
to really take a toll on my mental health. As we start to look as we start to look for the next community after our time in Korea, came to an end. So that really came back much later on in my career. But yeah, no, certainly not necessarily the case. 2008, 2009. I was much too young. And I was like, oh, time's on my side. I was,
And you were more
I'll,
seasoned
if
of a teacher than I was. I only had 4 years in when I was, or 5 years in when
Mhm,
I was in Kuwait.
mhm,
And those are your youngest years. Those are the make it or break it years
yeah,
in education, no matter
mhm,
where in the world you are,
yeah,
right? But you got over that and you went on to Korea. I mean, I could talk to you for hours,
mhm,
but I mean, we might as well talk about different. I mean, you went to SIS in Korea.
mhm.
And I never did ask you what you were teaching at the time. And you
Ah,
went for just yeah. Let's talk about that.
okay. So in Canada, in Toronto, I was grade six homeroom. So
Middle school.
Ontario middle school, you can't teach a little bit of everything, right? But then since once I came overseas, you're kind of forced to kind of specialize,
Yep.
in one subject, even though it's middle school. So from pretty much from 2006 onwards, all the way through to 2022, I was middle school language arts, whether it's grade six, grade
I
seven,
was
or
gonna
grade eight.
I was gonna say social
No,
studies, but you're a
no,
language arts guy. All right.
language arts guy, and I'm a middle school educator through and through. There's something special about middle school kids and middle school educators that makes it a really like no 2 days are different. whether the kids are a little wonky or whether the adults are a little wonky, there's something to be said about the middle school experience. And I've spent enough time in that space to appreciate the joy and the learning that comes from the day to day and the relationships of the kids and the families and the learning that you go through as an individual and as a professional. And I wouldn't trade that experience in for anything.
Man, bless your heart for being middle school. And I tell you what, in Korea, when you were there for a couple of years and you taught middle school again, right? You did a little liberal arts again. I mean, excuse me, language arts,
Language arts,
ELA.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And boy, I have a question for you. Going from Kuwait to Korea, actually from Canada to Kuwait to Korea, lots of k-k-k's. Do you always choose countries that start with a k sound? You're a language arts guy. You must be into this, right?
Yes. So
my serious point is, do you think that students are different in different countries, or do you think they're generally the same?
I think
Kids.
the needs of learners, the needs of especially adolescent learners, in middle school are the same. How they express themselves, I think, is what really separates the experience. Um, you know, and you know this, Greg. And our kids here, our families here, are very privileged, and so it is not uncommon for kids to grow up with an army of help available to them at their call and beckon. And so some of that sense of I'm really hesitant in using this word, a sense of entitlement, right? That the how easy it is for them to access help, right? Translates in the classroom, because at home there's always someone there to quote unquote do it for them, right? To help them with something. And so some of that lack, I don't want to use the word lack of grit or resilience, but that motivation or that, hey, that drive to like really figure out for themselves, it doesn't appear in our classrooms. Right.
Right.
Right. Parents in Kuwait, and I'm generalizing here, Greg. I hope I get that point across to your listeners. Tend to be a little bit more hands off, and I contrast that with the entity or the notion of education in Asia and Korea, right, where educators and education is much more respected, and parents are very much involved and they're actively engaged and they want to know and they want to learn with the kids. It's almost two extreme two extreme ends of the dichotomy, right? The Korean kids work extremely hard, almost to a point of being unhealthy, because after the school day is over, they're off to academies, hagwons, for more math, more English, or more volleyball, more piano, whatever interests and passions that they
Just
may
to get
have,
ahead. Yeah.
just to get ahead. And then that school ends at 3:30. They'll do the academies and hagwons till like well after dinner, and then they'll go home and they'll do the hagwon homework and then do the school homework, and then they'll go to bed at like in well way past their bedtime, right? And then they'll wake up the next morning, hop on a school bus, come to school and do it over again and again and again, right? I remember getting emails, from kids in Korea, like 11:30 midnight. My phone would ding. I'm like, hey, Mr. Tong, can you help me with blah 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 blah? I'm like, and then as an educator at that point, I'm like, okay, I have a decision to make. You're emailing me at 11:30 on Thursday night, right? Asking me for help. Do I, one, help you so that you get the work done, or do I ignore you, knowing that, well, it's really, it's past your bedtime. Why are you still
Right.
up? Because I know
I'm
you
sleeping,
need,
man, and you
right?
should
Like
be too.
yeah, you should be too. You need to hop on the school bus at at 6:30 the next morning to come back to school, etc. So, um, but the kids in at least in my experience, the 8 years that I was there, like the kids will jump through hoops for you, and they'll do everything that you ask for and more.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
And so after Kuwait, it was a welcome change, just in terms of just the space that we're living in. Getting out of the Middle East region. Moving to Korea, just and getting a chance to explore Asia with Marie, and trips to Hong Kong, to Japan, traveling around Southeast Asia. It was just a different experience, a much needed experience. After 8 years in Kuwait, and
Freedom.
we
I
have
mean, Kuwait is like the size of New Hampshire or something, or something like that, right? It's very, very small. And what I remember a few things from Kuwait. I mean, I'll remember everything from Kuwait, but I think with sharing with this in this conversation, my opinion is that kids are the same around the world as far as developmental, as far as needs, as far as wants. But like you said, I think there's a lot of cultural differences, and what I've also found is economic differences. That lack of grit and the lack of parent involvement goes very well with the idea of economical status. Like a lot of people that are the very wealthy, the very top world wealthy kids that I've taught, their parents are most of the time, and we're talking in general, right? Not to step on people, but in general, a lot of those parents are hands off completely in middle school, right? Elementary might be a little different, but my experience with middle schoolers, they're more hands off. It's like ship them away or ship them off to school, and we trust the educator. They're from the West, and they're going to teach my kids. So I'm going to get my maid. I'm going to get my driver, go pick them up.
That's
maybe
right.
maybe even pay them $100 an hour to do some tutoring after school, and
That's right.
then
Yeah.
send them to school. Tell me a little bit about. That's what I remember about Kuwait. So tell me about tutoring in Kuwait. Tell me a little bit about that.
Tutoring is very much a live and well side gig for a lot of educators. I
Great
certainly partook in
opportunity.
it. Absolutely, I certainly partook in it. My previous stint here in 06 to 14, it was just a real easy way to make a little bit of cash on the side, and it's like you said, the amount of money that parents will pay you to in some cases sit there for an hour or two with their child to do homework is is incredible, and it speaks to the wealth that these families have access to, and it's very lucrative for teachers involved, but it also speaks to the family dynamics and the family values as well that they're exhibiting. So
I remember going over and tutoring. The driver would pick me up, drive me an hour out. This is after a full day of school. And I only did a little time because they drove me all the way out to the house. paid me $100 an hour, but it was sitting downstairs. The maid would bring down a full meal for me, and I would eat all alone in the basement. And when the kid was ready, when the student was ready, the student would come down, and they would expect me to stay for an hour of tutoring. So they wouldn't include the meal and the drive and everything. And then I had an hour drive home, and it was too taxing on me because that $100 for the hour turned out to be $100 for 4 hours. With everything included, and they thought they were doing me a favor by paying me enough, and it just didn't work out for me. And not only that, but I was doing the homework. They expect me to do the homework for the kid, right? And I that was just one student in the whole world for my experience. I never did it again, and that's just the way it happened with me. And I've taught tutoring in many other countries, several other countries. Differently. I've had much different experiences, and that was just what I ran into. I felt it was economic. That there's a lack of empathy and expectation that the teacher's going to do the work.
Yeah,
for that
I think
kid.
the word tutoring is can be very misleading, right? And it's not necessarily tutoring. It's more like, okay, let's sit down and, hey, Mister, why don't you write this paragraph for me, or like, I've barely attempted at this work, but can you like fix it and do it for me, right? Or like, hey, Mister, I have a test tomorrow morning in this subject. Can you come tonight for like 4 hours?
But I'm not here to step on Kuwait and say that this is Kuwait.
No.
This is in
No,
and
no,
I
no,
want to make
absolutely
sure,
not.
right?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure my listeners know that even though my experience is much different, I have some great stories about Kuwait and students and how much their parents care. I had a student that the parents wanted to pay me to stay there in the country when I decided to leave. They wanted to pay me just to be their own teacher.
Yeah.
And they had the money for it. I just couldn't do that. It wasn't my style.
No, certainly it runs the gamut, and like you said, right? Like and I'm at fault here too, like for bringing up some of the ones that stick out. Maybe because they stick out because they're not like the true essence of what tutoring should entail.
Examples, outliers, yeah,
right? Yeah, for sure. But by and large, families, want you there, the kids want you there to just support and reinforce what they're doing at school, and kind of maybe get them some of the personal attention that maybe they didn't get at school that day, et cetera. So no, for sure, the tutoring really runs the gamut. Absolutely.
At the school you're at right now in Kuwait, is it mainly Kuwaiti students or is it expat and Kuwaiti?
So we came back 2 school years ago. Came back. I used to work. Came back, but this ASK, the American School of Kuwait, was Marie's school from her first stint here in 09-14. It was kind of crosstown rivals for me at that point in my career. BBS and
Absolutely.
had a thing with sports and whatnot. So the demographics of ASK has changed as well. Pre-COVID, it was very international. Embassy kids, State Department, contractors, foreign corporations, and whatnot. Ever since COVID, the demographics have changed, and it's much more Kuwaiti than it ever had been in its previous 63 years.
I was going to say that's interesting because ASK was known as a more of an expat community school, and it was competing always with Al Bayan, and those are the big names that come out of Kuwait at a lot of the fairs, and by being established, how many years they've been there. And I know there's lots of other schools going up, but those are the two big ones, right? You got two of the big ones in Kuwait.
Yeah. We've actually, coming back to Kuwait was easy for us because we knew what we're getting ourselves into, right? And not to say that in an off-putting way. It was, we knew, what housing would look like. We knew the way to school. We knew,
you had drivers. You still had a maid probably you could get in touch with. You had all those things still there, probably.
right? Like I had a driver's license my first go around, so I was able to just renew that and whatnot. So it was easy, and coming back to community that we knew, and we still had friends that had left and came back or have stayed. Made it real easy to come back into Kuwait, and certainly we've enjoyed our 2 years here thus far, and we've got a couple more to go.
Let's talk a little bit about the culture there. And
Okay.
one of my pointed questions is that
Mhm.
have you integrated into the Kuwaiti at all? The Kuwaiti people themselves and the families. Have you made Kuwaiti friends? Because when I was there, I had probably
Mm.
three. And it allowed
Okay.
me to integrate and learn true Kuwaiti culture.
Okay.
I was wondering if you had that opportunity, if you could share a little bit about that.
Okay. That's a great question. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to give you some reasons for that, Greg. One, just being as a family of three, we our weekends kind of plan themselves, right? Olivia, being a 5-year-old, has more social engagements than I do. So on weekends, it's swimming lessons, ballet lessons, birthday parties, and then I do have Kuwaiti. I don't familiar faces, let's say acquaintances that that we cross paths during softball season.
Got it. Yeah.
Not necessarily to the point of being friends yet per se, where we go for diwania or do iftar together, but certainly I look forward to those opportunities when they come. But no, I think even thinking back to my first stint here, like 8 years, '06 to 14, I don't recall.
It can be a bubble,
Maybe
right? It can be a
it
bubble
can
that you're
be,
in
yeah.
because the Kuwaiti, it seems like the Kuwaitis travel when they can. Like the Kuwaitis that I know would
Hmm.
like flee the country first thing smoking. And then I would sort of follow, like if I was leaving the
Hmm.
country that weekend or that break. But it was always the Kuwaitis that left first. And it's
No.
just because they have the money and the wherewithal and they love to travel
Hmm.
outside of their
Yeah.
country. And then I was also single and I didn't have a lot of outlets. And I was fortunate to have a few people that knew connections. And I ended up meeting a
Hmm.
couple people and
Hmm.
was invited into their homes. And they were very Western thinking Kuwaitis too.
Okay.
And it was
Yeah.
very different for me because it's
Yeah.
a bubble there. And where I teach right now, it's very similar. It's a bubble.
Yeah.
I don't know any
Hmm.
Saudis. I mean,
Yeah.
I sort of part of me feels terrible about that because I feel like the best way to get into the local culture is to meet and make friends
Absolutely.
with the
Yeah.
local culture, but
Yeah.
people don't want to teach me Arabic. People
Hmm.
don't want to bring me into their homes. The Saudis don't really care that I'm here. I'm just sort of working. And it felt that way in
Hmm.
Kuwait for the most part,
Yeah.
but I was fortunate to have a few connections.
Yeah.
So maybe you feel the same. I feel it's a bubble. And not only that, but you have your family. You're focused on
Hmm.
a family.
Hmm.
And that's she's in her younger years.
She's 5 years old. She's going finishing up KG1, going to KG2. Her best friend at school right now is a Kuwaiti girl, and then they swim together. They do swimming lessons together. So her parents and us, we chit chat poolside, and after swimming Wednesday night, we all hit up McDonald's together. So
Yeah.
like they're beginning steps of a friendship there and whatnot. And certainly Olivia and Amina are great friends, and they have play dates on the weekends and whatnot. I would add though, Greg, like it is so easy to just the bubble's there because it helps you to transition into the country, onboarding into a new school community, and with staff housing and whatnot. There's
Yep.
a built-in bubble, built-in community for you right from the get-go, from the moment you step off the plane, and for however long you stay in country. And so it was the same thing in Korea. It's not necessarily just a Kuwait thing. Where in Korea it's just as easy for us to stay within our housing bubble, our staff bubble, and yes, we'll go out and explore local Korean restaurants and sites and whatnot, and we'll get immersed into that the Korean culture through maybe through spouses or partners that are Korean. And but in both cases, the school in Korea and here, like we do trips, right? They offer opportunities for language lessons and whatnot. So, for your listeners that are looking to go overseas, I would certainly say, hey, encourage them to, like, when they do come overseas, they do take advantage of those opportunities, because it does make staying wherever you go, easier, and it helps with the transition, and hey, may be the deciding factor as to, like, whether you stay 2 years or 8 years or however long you stay in that community. Right?
Well, I have two comments to backpack on that. I think that I think you can go to a country and live in that bubble that's provided for you as a safety blanket. And a lot of people do that and love it, especially if you're with a family and you just want to focus on your family and not have a lot of other outside hardships. You can rely on that bubble. It's there for a reason, like you said. That's very well put. And then my other point is that sometimes, especially the single people, not only, but especially single people, will have to work a little bit at breaking out of that bubble. And some countries are harder than others. When I moved to Venezuela, or when I moved to where was it, Cambodia, I was instantly in the culture because I didn't have like a compound I was living in. I was living with the locals, and working at the schools around there, but
Yeah.
traveling through the traffic and all that stuff, it makes a difference. And it depends
No,
on
absolutely.
your experience. It's set up. And when you get there, you figure it out. Is it going to be more of a bubble or not? But either way, you do have to sort of reach out. And I encourage people to reach out and meet people from the local culture. If you're fortunate enough, that's great. If you're not, then work at it. Right. Here's a good question. Here's a good question for you about Kuwait. Is it safe for you and for your family?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Certainly, and for a family of three, between our homeschool life, the commute back and forth, we're lucky to have a car. Malls, restaurants, the beach club, absolutely, it's very safe. If Marie's out by herself, we have a couple of reliable taxi drivers that we use. If Marie goes to the mall with Olivia, like, there's no issues. No, safety is not a concern for us here, as a family of three. No, not at all. Like, it never crossed our minds. No.
We had a past episode where we had talked about this. Our other co-host Darian is a father of three wonderful children, and he and his wife are here, and they have nothing but safety to talk about, and exploration and safety in Saudi. So that's a great message to listeners for the younger families, or he's got two elementary and a middle schooler. They're in a very safe place to raise children. And I like to call it like the 1970s or 1950s USA small town here on compound.
Yeah,
It's a much different experience. And I remember Kuwait as being safe too. I mean, I wasn't worried because they've got some pretty strict rules. No bacon, no alcohol, right? But you get used to that if that's
for
your
sure.
gig,
Yeah.
right? But it's refreshing to hear so many positive things about Kuwait. You don't always hear positive things, but you've been there twice now, and you're currently there. I do have a couple questions from the show. Unless you have some other things you want to talk about, anything you want to pinpoint?
Yes, I do. I want to loop back to the previous conversation about onboarding and experiencing local cultures. One of the lessons that I've learned, and I share this with everyone that's either transitioning into a new community or coming overseas for the first time, is when you get to a new space, like, don't say no. Don't turn down invitations. When people that have been there for a while, or even with people that you're joining a community with, the quote unquote newbies, if there's an invitation to go out for coffee, go explore a different part of town, go see a site, jump at it. Even though you may be tired, jet lagged, you got tons of stuff to do at school, right? It may go out, right? That's another one of those mechanisms that you have available to you to really immerse yourself into the community, into the country, and that's something that gets a little bit harder with a 4 or 5-year-old, but certainly it's something that we really embraced as well. Even coming back to Kuwait, even coming back to a community and a country that we are familiar with. So, oh yeah, hey, let's go see the farms. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. You're either building or creating relationships, or you're maintaining relationships, right? So, hey, let's go do something, right? It's just part of the experiences, and people's time in a certain community or space is however long it is. Some exits or some departures are planned, some are unplanned, but we're all part of each other's stories for however long those chapters may be. And it's important to have those like shared experiences together. And so yeah, I encourage your listeners that, hey, if you're, doesn't matter how long you're somewhere, but especially when you're new to community, like, don't say no. Go and do whatever your other people are doing. Like, see the country, learn the language, explore, right? And be safe, but but do all the things that you can to really help yourself immerse into the community.
I have a very good friend of mine named Emily Cave. She's been on here before on the show, and she's currently in Thailand as a school head. She gave me some advice one year of many advice pieces that she's given, but she right along with what you say. One of her pieces of advice is don't turn down a first invitation because you're almost guaranteed not to be invited again. But if you go the first time and you decide whether that's for you, whether it's safe, whether it's your taste, whether it's something you want to continue doing, you can decline the invitation later on, and they'll still invite you. But that first invitation, especially, and you're right, that's a jump off a bridge when you're in a place you've never been before.
No, for sure. No.
Right.
No,
Take those
absolutely,
invitations.
yeah.
That's great advice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As we're getting a little bit longer in the show, we have our 2 questions, and maybe you're ready with these. Our first one is, what are 3 things that you take with you, not including your wife and child, anything with a heartbeat?
Okay.
3 things that maybe you take with you when you go from Canada to Korea and Kuwait and any other country that starts with the cuss sound.
Well, I'm not a very sentimental guy. I'm not big on mementos or trinkets and whatnot, but there are certain items or certain like gear, that I take with me. One is always, a comfy pair of walking shoes, right? Because whenever you're new to a country, where you need something to get your 12, 15,000 steps in every day, right? Hat and I'm not saying this to push the brand or anything like that, but I'm a big Patagonia guy, and I love the gear and whatnot, and so
this show brought to you by Patagonia. Patagonia, wear it everywhere. It's secure. It's safe. It'll keep you going.
Yeah. So so it does matter. Like you look at my my photos from the last half a dozen years that.
Everything's Patagonia. Are you wearing Patagonia right now?
I know this is a different brand, but like I have a Patagonia trucker hat that in a couple of different colorways that I always wear, duffel bags and whatnot. But anyways, yeah. So that's my not being able to name Marie and Olivia kind of took the steam out of the question there.
Oh,
Greg,
I'm sorry. Well, those are intended.
Okay.
We all
I know.
that's part of it. Yeah. So your
hat,
hat, you got your Patagonia stuff, and you've got some walking shoes and
walking shoes. I think just a willingness to be uncomfortable, to really push your boundaries as a person, and say, hey, you know what? I've never done this before. I've never tried this before. Right? Let's give it a try. Let's within legal limits and be safe and all that, right? So and I say that and a specific example come to mind. Like went on a food tour in Vietnam a few years back. It was the back of a bike. I think the company's called Back of a Bike. Back of the bike.
The rickshaws, yeah.
So no, they're little mopeds, and then you sit on the back of a moped, and then they give you a helmet, and then there's a driver that takes you to
the moped taxis,
yeah. So And then so we did a food tour. Maria and I did a food tour that way, and there's an item, a delicacy, if you will, called a balut, B-A-L-U-T. It is a fertilized chicken egg.
Oh, no.
So, they crack it open, and then yes, you can see. You look inside, and there's you can make out some feathers and a beak, and, and whatnot. And the idea is that you do it like a shot, right? And then so, this is part of pushing boundaries, right? Being curious and being uncomfortable. So here we go. You do it like a shot, and you wash it down with a beverage, and say, hey, so I think in lieu of something that's really tangible, something that you can put your hands on, I would encourage your listeners to one day explore new space, new countries, and come to it with an open mind, right? Come to it with a sense of curiosity, because odds are it's not going to be the same as where you came from, like wherever you're coming from.
Yeah, no way. I attest to that.
Right.
No way. You have lots of stories.
So yeah, do come into your travels, your international teaching experience with an open mind, and you'll be a better person for it. I can attest to that. So there you go.
I love your three things that you take with you around the world. I'm impressed, because mine is very like ice and a maid. I'm like that. And some kind of driving, whether it's a moped or a car. Yeah. I feel I need to change those, because the last couple of guests, including yourself, have wowed me with what they take with them. Our other question on the show is a police story or customs story that you'd like to share that won't get you in trouble.
I do have a customs story here in Kuwait. I'm going to flee my way out of this one, Greg, just because I'm still in country, and I don't know who's going to be listening. But I do want the show and you and your co-host to hold me accountable. Have me come back. I'll be happy to come back onto the show.
Absolutely.
At a different time once I'm out of the country. I will say this is what I'll say. How about this? It does involve me, being caught with something that I shouldn't have been at the airport on my way in, and I'm going to leave it at that.
See, I don't live there. I smuggled bacon into the country, and I'll leave it at that too. Because you know what? We need to respect the fact that you live in a country as a guest, and we don't want to air something that would possibly get you or your family in trouble. And that there's people listening out there, so we won't do that. Let's skip that one, and you're coming back in your next country, which is going to be Cambodia or Cameroon Kazakhstan. There's so many K. How many can you name that start with the letter C or K?
Yeah, that's right. But no, I'll be happy to come back and share that story and go from there.
That's great. You should definitely come back on the show and visit, because we have so many stories. And the fact, dude, I'm impressed that you ate those little chickens, because I couldn't get myself to do that. And they do that. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. That's why I keep rubbing my eye. It's crazy when that kind of a thing happens. I will go into a little detail about that bacon story. I'll tell you a little police story. I won't get in trouble for it.
Okay.
Until I try to go back to Kuwait. I'm sure they're going to be at the border going, yes, halas, you are coming with us, right? I have a police story from Kuwait. And the story is that I had a Sri Lankan driver that ended up, just a taxi driver that ended up taking me quite a few times back and forth to the airport, back and forth to school early in my stay there. And he invited me to a it was like he knew the godfather of the Sri Lankans. So like the Sri Lankans have this underground, their community in Kuwait, and the Sri Lankan godfather had invited him to bring me and my two friends, a teaching couple, with him to this celebration. And we get to this celebration, and they have all these long tables set up. And there's alcohol. It's called Siddiqui, and it's what the Kuwait with the Sri Lankans, they ferment fruit and make an alcohol out of it. So there's bottles of this sitting all over on the tables, And I'm like, wow, this is really weird. And I was like, I'm sitting next to him, and he's like, I want you to do me a favor. Not really, but it's like the Godfather movies, right?
Yes.
And everyone stopped to pay their respects to him. We're talking, we're sharing our stories. My driver's at the table too. And all of a sudden, knock, 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 right on the door. And these Kuwaiti police, come storming into the whole hallway. And everybody's like hiding all the alcohol under, because there's a very strict no alcohol in the country. And they're all hiding it under the tables. And one of the police officers walks up to the godfather of the Sri Lankans, and they say something. I don't know what was said, but the godfather just says something to the police officer. They shake hands, and the police leave. And just like that, the police are back out the door, and everybody pulls the bottles back up, and they're sort of looking around while they're pouring. But that's all I really understood. It was such a dramatic situation. I thought I was going to jail, right? I thought I was going. Here's my two friends that are teaching couple with me. They were horrified, thinking they're going to Kuwaiti jail. But wow, what an experience. And I can't explain it.
Serious wasta. Yeah, that's serious wasta.
Meaning power, like influence,
power,
right?
Like
we
influence,
have it.
Right?
Influence is the word wasta in the Arab world. It was, it takes me back to those days in Kuwait, Wow. But I had to share that story. I can't go back there now. They're going to be like, you're on the border. And here he is. That's him.
Hey.
How about some final thoughts for us? Give us some final thoughts for our listeners, and then we'll invite you back next time.
You know what? I think for your listeners that are sitting on the fence, that are curious about whether it's, quote unquote, the right time for them to explore international teaching, there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect time in your life, professionally or personally, that's going to give you a blazing neon sign and say, hey, you need to get your passport and go overseas. So, but if you're feeling unsure, that's a sign that you're thinking about it. You're curious. And I would encourage your listeners to really embrace that curiosity and just give it a try, right? Whether you're at, the beginning of your career, educator, or whether you have a couple of years left, you have maybe 5-10 years left, and maybe you're, getting a little tired of, the normal, whatever that normal is for you, at home, wherever your state, your province, or wherever it is. So really embrace that curiosity and kind of jump in with both feet, because, international education is a transformative experience. I have lifelong friends. I met my wife, Canadians, two Canadians meeting each other overseas in Kuwait, right? Like, you don't need a dating app, right? Like, who thought that, right? Like, and so, I really encourage your listeners to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, don't know whether this is for me, but let's go for it. Worst case scenario is 2 years. Worst case scenario is 2 years. You get, kind of push your boundaries a little bit, challenge your comfort zones a little bit. See the world, right? Because even if it's just 2 years, that experience will transform you as a person and as an educator. And you'll go back to wherever you're from, you'll step back in the classroom, having a much, much broader view of the world, of what education and adolescence and learning can look like. And, your students will thank you for that. So I really encourage your listeners to jump in, give it a shot, and go from there.
What a great way of ending this show. I have to thank you so much, Terence. You have eloquently said so many things that run through me and through a lot of our teachers out in the world that are doing this like we are with a career. You've been in this a long time. And I want to thank our guest, Terence Tong. This has been a great discussion. If you want to find him, he's wearing Patagonia outfits all the time on the beach in Kuwait. You can grab a hold of him. I am Greg, the single guy, sitting in for all of my other co-hosts early this morning here in Saudi. And I want to say thank you, Terence, for being on the show. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you next time to hear that story at some point when you're in another country, though, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for your words of wisdom. That was great. All right, we'll see you guys next show.